Welcome back to the deep dive. When most of us think of the UFC, we see those incredible knockout
Oh
highlights.
yeah, the gladiator theater.
Exactly. The human body pushed to its absolute limit. But what happens when you start to look behind the octagon?
That's where it gets complicated.
Right. So today we've pulled together a really deep stack of sources. We're talking everything from public legal filings and Endeavor stock reports to some really hardcore investigative journalism.
And peer-reviewed academic papers, which is fascinating.
Absolutely. Our mission today is pretty clear. We want to cut through all that marketing hype and just extract the cold, hard facts about the UFC's business model.
Mm.
How is it structured? How are fighters controlled? And what's the true cost of stepping into that cage?
And I think if we have to set one piece of context for this whole deep dive, it's this.
Mm-hmm.
The UFC is, first and foremost, a highly sophisticated private entertainment company.
Entertainment first.
Entertainment first. All our sources point to this. Their main priority is marketability, it's PPV sales, it's maximizing shareholder value.
So pure sporting fairness. That's not number one.
It's secondary. And understanding that distinction, entertainment versus sport, that's the lens you have to view every single decision they make through.
Okay, so let's start with the money, because that seems to be the foundation for their whole strategy. We know the organization makes hundreds of millions.
Billions in some cases.
But our source review, it confirms that fighters typically receive only, 15 to 20% of the total revenue pool?
That 15 to 20% figure it's jarring. It really is, especially when you put it next to, say, other elite sports.
Like boxing.
Exactly. In major boxing promotions or even, the NBA, you see athletes commanding 50%, sometimes even more, of the total revenue.
50. So the gap is just colossal.
That's huge.
But I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Is that disparity inherently unfair? I mean, the UFC takes on all the massive production costs, the marketing, the huge financial risk. Isn't 15% maybe reasonable given that burden?
That would be a fair question if the fighters had other options, if they had real alternatives.
Okay.
But what's revealed in the documentation, especially in the evidence from the UFC Fighters versus Zuffa LLC antitrust lawsuit, is that the organization exercises what economists call monopsony power.
Monopsony, that sounds powerful.
It is. In simple terms, a monopoly is one seller, right? Monopsony is one buyer.
Ah, I see.
The UFC is the dominant, pretty much the only buyer of elite mixed martial arts labor in the world. So because a fighter can't really go anywhere else to compete at that top level, the UFC can just dictate the prices.
Which leads right back to that low revenue split.
Directly. That structure is what lets them keep the money so disproportionately locked at the top of the company.
So it's like the championship belt is almost less valuable than having a microphone and a big personality.
You've nailed it. We saw so many examples where these huge PPV draws, Conor McGregor or a Jorge Masvidal, they earned exponentially more than some undisputed champions in their divisions.
So it's a system where visibility dictates your pay, not just your athletic merit.
Absolutely. And that financial pressure, it filters all the way down. This is something that comes up again and again in insider interviews. Fighters have to pay for their entire training camp.
Wait, they pay for their own prep? The whole thing?
The whole thing. Coaches, travel, nutritionists, sparring partners, medicals, everything.
So if you're on a standard contract, getting a lower purse, you could spend, $5,000, $10,000 just to get ready?
Easily. Which means you might actually lose money just to step into that cage and do your job. You're essentially paying to work.
That puts that 15% revenue share into a really brutal perspective. And you said the sources back this up.
Oh, yeah. The Endeavor stock reports, they publicly detail the revenue and the fighter cost ratio. But the smoking gun was those antitrust lawsuit documents. They showed internal strategies designed specifically to maintain this dominance.
Okay, so this financial control is only possible because of the contractual control. When we started digging into the contracts themselves, what was the most, shocking thing you found about how they maintain this iron grip?
The most immediate shock is just how restrictive the terms are. They overwhelmingly favor the promotion. Once a fighter signs, they essentially become the UFC's exclusive property in the MMA world.
They can't fight anywhere else?
Nope. Can't compete in any other major promotions.
Is that forever? Indefinitely?
Not indefinitely, but it can feel like it,
Yeah.
especially for the champions. This is where you see the infamous champions clause.
Okay, what's that?
If you win a title, the UFC has the right to extend your contract for more fights. So just when you reach the absolute peak of the sport, just when your market value is highest,
You get locked
you
down.
get locked down for years. Yeah, it prevents you from ever testing your true value on the open market.
So the prize for being the best is losing your freedom. That's
Yeah,
a fascinating use of leverage. And I assume this grip filters right into the sporting side.
yeah.
Rankings, matchmaking.
Oh, completely. It is
Right.
far from a meritocracy. It's really fascinating here is the clear evidence we see, mostly from independent journalists, that rankings are heavily influenced by things way outside of just athletic performance.
You mean like,
PPV sales potential, storyline needs, the company's overall marketing strategy.
can you give me an example of that? Of strategic matchmaking.
Sure. The UFC strategically builds its stars.
Hmm.
If they have a marketable prospect, someone who talks well, has an exciting style, draws a crowd, they will often avoid high-risk fights for that person early on.
Give them favorable matchups.
Exactly. Matchups designed to make them look dominant, build their brand value. And on the flip side, they've been known to create these huge money fights for their cash cows, even if the rankings don't technically support a title shot.
All because of the drama guarantees a massive gate and a huge PPV number.
Precisely.
So these big rivalries we see, they're not always organic clashes of will. They're often constructed narratives.
They're engineered. The hype is definitely engineered. Our sources confirm this.
Yeah.
The trash talk, the dramatic face-offs, that's not just encouraged. It's sometimes guided.
Guided by who?
We see cases where the promotion's own staff will push certain narrative angles or even suggest topics of tension to fighters before a big event, all to boost that critical pay-per-view buy rate. It's brilliant marketing, but it means that line between sport and scripted entertainment gets really, really blurry.
And these business decisions, the control, the manipulation, they have to have direct physical consequences. We have to talk about the toll this system demands. We saw so many fighters admit that the weight cut is actually harder and more dangerous than the fight itself.
This is maybe the most shocking medical finding from the academic research we looked at, and we're not just talking about dieting here.
Right.
We're talking about fighters aggressively dehydrating themselves to lose 10 to 12 kilograms. That's 20, 25 pounds of water weight
In how long?
in a desperate 24 to 48 hours right before the weigh-in.
That's an insane amount of fluid to lose so quickly.
And the medical consequences are severe, and they're really well documented. Extreme dehydration like that causes kidney stress, it slows your cognitive function, and, this is the critical part, it drastically increases the risk of brain injury.
How does it do that?
When you strip your body of that much fluid, your brain actually shrinks a little inside your skull. It increases the space between the brain and the cranial wall. So if you take a punch in that dehydrated state,
The risk of a knockout or a concussion just skyrockets.
skyrockets. And this isn't just, locker room talk. This is validated science.
So where do we find that?
It's in peer-reviewed journals, places like the Journal of Combat Sports and Martial Arts, and studies in the British Journal of Sports Medicine. They specifically link these rapid weight loss practices to increased concussion severity and long-term cognitive problems. This system basically forces them into it.
And on the regulatory side, for a long time, the UFC had this partnership with USADA, the U.S. anti-doping agency that was meant to be the independent watchdog, right?
Right, USADA's role was essential. They were the external objective body testing for prohibited substances. And while the partnership definitely did reduce widespread doping, it was constantly plagued by tension.
What kind of tension?
Well, our sources show this constant friction between USADA's super rigid zero-tolerance policies, which sometimes suspended fighters for, like trace amounts of stuff that wasn't even performance-enhancing, and the UFC's desire to keep its big, marketable stars fighting.
So regulatory consistency was clashing directly with corporate financial needs.
Precisely. That tension created legal conflicts, a
Yeah.
real philosophical divide. And in the end, the UFC just ended the partnership.
Which really highlights that core tension, doesn't it?
It does. When they were faced with the choice between an external regulator that could sideline a high-value asset and maintaining total corporate control over the roster, control won.
So if we put all these pieces together, the financial monopsony, the restrictive contracts, the engineered hype, the acceptance of these extreme physical risks, it really paints a complete picture.
It really does. It paints a picture of an entity that is optimized, above all else, for maximum revenue extraction.
And for you, the listener, if you want this level of understanding, knowing where this information comes from is so important. Because you're not going to find this stuff in your standard sports headlines.
Not at all. Think about the legal sources we talked about. Those antitrust lawsuit documents are invaluable. They forced the UFC to reveal internal management philosophy, internal emails about fighter pay, and control things they would never, ever share willingly.
Essential insider knowledge. And then you have the independent, non-sponsored journalism.
Yeah, outlets like Bloody Elbow. They're known for being independent. They're often the first to expose contract restrictions or underpaid fighters, precisely because they aren't tied to the big UFC sponsors. They offer that vital, critical counter-narrative.
And then there's the context you get from the fighters themselves.
For sure. In those long-form interviews, like the ones Ariel Helwani does, you often get fighters to finally admit to these contract traps or share personal mistreatment stories. It just highlights the power imbalance in a way a press conference never could.
We even have the historical perspective right from the very beginning. Books like Is This Legal? By the co-founder Art Davie, he explained all the early chaos in politics. And Blood in the Cage, that was a raw look at the origins of these pay struggles.
It shows these issues are baked in. They're foundational, not something new.
So when we put it all together, what's the key lesson here? From our deep dive, it seems to be that the UFC operates first and foremost as a sophisticated entertainment entity.
Right. And the financial and strategic decisions, which are driven by that contract control and PPV metrics,
Okay.
they consistently override pure sporting merit.
It's an incredibly successful machine. It's designed to generate stars and revenue, but often at the direct expense of its contractually controlled labor force.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. Given the highly restrictive contracts that limit a fighter's ability to earn money elsewhere, and this whole strategy that prioritizes PPV stars over champions, what ethical obligations does an entertainment company truly have to the long-term health, the financial stability, and the post-career security of its performers?
That's a great question. Does just calling it entertainment absolve them of responsibility for the people taking these immense physical risks?
It's the central question, isn't it?
Something to wrestle with next time you watch a big event. Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive.